O'Meara failed lamentably in his endeavors to obtain some alleviation of the emperor's captivity, especially in that which Napoleon most desired, a change of governor and the dismissal of Hudson Lowe. How did he fail? The only cards he could play were the emperor's health and the absolute impossibility of his escape. General Gourgaud had just asserted that the emperor had never been better and that he could leave St. Helena wherever he liked. Moreover, to every request, to every complaint, there was a ready reply. The emperor was not ill. That is why Lowe considered it necessary that he should have a doctor. He sent to O'Meara's old residence at Longwood his man Verling, who was a doctor whom General Bonaparte knew since he traveled with him on the Northumberland. If the general was ill, he need only consult Verling. If he did not consult him, then he was not ill. Napoleon, however, refused all association with Verling and thereby remained without relief during the time when the symptoms he had shown began to develop and ought to have had the closest supervision and attention during the night of January 16th, 1819. After being without medical care for 6 months, an accident happened. Overcome with giddiness, Napoleon fainted. In accordance with the orders he had received, Masson did not summon Verling, but requested the services of the doctor of the flagship Conqueror, a certain Dr. Stocco, a friend of O'Meara, who had introduced him to the emperor when there had been a question of consulting him in the preceding June. Stocco arrived at Longwood on the morning of the 17th, but did not see the emperor, who was seeking relief in a hot bath. The possibility of his staying at Longwood was discussed by Masson, Bertrand, and himself, but such an arrangement had to be submitted to the governor and the admiral for their approval, since they could find no urgency nor immediate necessity for his presence there. Stocco returned on board, but was summoned again in the night. He issued a bulletin. The most alarming symptoms were those which were in evidence the night before last. Their return could easily prove fatal, were help not at hand. Summoned again on the 19th, he broke the rules which Lowe had just laid upon him, and which could not actually be carried out. He saw the emperor without Verling being present, bled him, and stayed the night. On the 21st, despite the fact that he realized that his post was at stake, he obeyed the admiral, who ordered him to return to Longwood. He was kept by the emperor for an hour and a half beyond the time allowed him by the admiral, and rather than face the results, he decided to request his return to England for health reasons. He succeeded, arrived in London, and was immediately sent back to St. Helena, where he was summoned before a court-martial on board the Conqueror and found guilty of having said and written that the emperor was ill, and ill with liver disease, in order to show that he was disposed to thwart the intentions of the restrictions of the governor of the island, and to favor the news of the French prisoners in supplying them with excuses for well-founded complaints. He was struck off the Navy list, so that, as General Gourgaud had preordained, no doctor, under penalty of dismissal, had the right to say that the emperor was ill. At this date, January 19th, something might yet have been done to relieve him, but from January 21st until September 21st, 8 months, the emperor did not see a doctor in order to obtain some sort of relief from his sufferings, which had become unbearable, and which he continued to attribute only to the liver disease. He spent part of the day and night in hot baths, which he took in the miserable little hovel behind his bedroom. He no longer worked. With whom could he work? Las Casas had been the great stimulator, and if he had stayed on St. Helena instead of the Memorial, which his overt egotism rendered suspicious everywhere, and wherein the insertion of statements as doubtful as they were apocryphal threw a certain discredit upon the whole thing, he could, by means of the emperor's dictations, no doubt have raised to his glory an unquestionable and worthy monument, but it would, it is true, have been to Napoleon and not to Las Casas. Nevertheless, a part of the manuscript published as memoirs of the emperor had been taken down by Las Casas from his dictation, and he had left the manuscripts at Longwood. Another part, just as important, had been dictated to General Gourgaud, who was the laborer of the colony. To occupy his day, he only had the emperor's dictations, the work which the latter requested of him: historical research, mathematical problems, studies of technical military questions, and his own journal, where wherein each evening he recorded with astonishing verbosity his actions, those of others, his sorrows, his devotion, and the happenings of the entire community. The emperor had not derived all the benefit possible from Gorgo because of his disposition. Having been present at all the campaigns since 1805, Gorgo might have been of inestimable value in recording their story and in giving the posterity the movements of gigantic military operations. The departure of Las Casas and Gorgo left Montillon, with whom he certainly worked, but only by fits and starts, throwing together certain phrases of refutation or justification concerning a book which had lately arrived from Europe, but without undertaking any long work, and Bertrand, with whom he resumed the Egyptian and Syrian campaigns, overhauling from the beginning the work on them sketchily done with Gorgo. He employed Masson in the battles of Julius Caesar, Saint-Denis most probably, on those of Turenne and Frederic, but when they were published, they were only valuable for the comparison they bore to his own method of war, and seemed, it must be admitted, rambling and of little interest. The fact was, the incentive was no longer there. He had lost all interest in his work, which had deemed only useful if it furnished an official record. That document would now be posthumous, and he no longer cared about it. What good were the pamphlets he had been able to write? Incensed with indignation, since he no longer had the means of sending them to Europe, and then the others, those he had published in the past, the letters du Cap, the Réponse Lord Bathurst. What had they produced? There was his greatest grief, incapacity. To what purpose was good writing, good thinking, good living? Those who had made the captive's existence tolerable, those who had taken his mind off present misery, were gone. Cipriani was dead, the only one in whose information he placed any reliance, that clever observer who turned to good purpose all the rumors from Jamestown, who made himself acquainted with everything the storeships brought, and who, with his skill of ingratiating himself, associated with the servants of the foreign commissioners, and even with those of the English officers. No Catholic priest conducted Cipriani to his last resting place. It was necessary for a Protestant clergyman to recite the funeral service, and it was this which prompted the emperor to request that a priest be sent to St. Helena to minister to him at the hour of his death. Admiral and Lady Malcolm had gone, the latter full of enthusiasm, the former imbued with respect, both knowing in their attitude towards him how to show courtesy and compassion, while at the same time preserving unswerving loyalty to their country. Malcolm had been consulted by the emperor as the judge of his complaints against Lowe. What greater proof could he give of his confidence in him? Lady Malcolm, who was the eldest daughter of the Honorable William Fullerton Elphinstone, the third son of the 10th Lord Elphinstone, who was the cousin of Admiral Keith, was, like all the Elphinstones, full of appreciation of him who had saved their brother, and was so charming towards the emperor that upon her departure she received as a present one of his beautiful porcelain cups. What greater token of his kindness could be conceived? As a Christmas present, Madame Bertrand and Madame de Montillon each received a plate, though not every year,